Good afternoon, welcome back to Football League World TV. It's time for the latest edition of the EFL Transfer Zone. We're just a month from the January transfer window. Try not to think about it too much, but it will come around pretty quickly now. I'm your host, George Dagless, guiding you through the next 20 or minutes so where we look at some of the biggest stories regarding transfers in the EFL. I'm joined by Ben Wignall and Adam Jones. Ben, how are you?
Very good, George. Weeks nicely ticking away to getting in the lead up to the big game at Ewood Park on Saturday, which I'll be attending, not in the press box for once, but in the away end. Very much looking forward to it.
Yeah, that's an exciting game for Preston and Blackburn fans. Adam, how are you?
Yeah, not bad, thank you. I'm excited actually because, two transfer zones in a week usually means there's quite a lot going on and it's a nice little build up to January. So yeah, I'm excited for this one.
Yeah, we are closing in on January now. Got a small amount of Christmas to get out of the way first, but soon it'll be the January window. So let's get straight into it. Do get in touch. We're across YouTube and Facebook this afternoon. Let us know your opinions at home on the transfer rumours we're going to discuss. And let's get straight into it. Let's talk Jamie Paterson first of all. This story come from the Daily Mail earlier this week that West Brom are among the clubs interested in Jamie Paterson, having a great season so far at Swansea, of course, only joined in the summer. Ben, let's come to you first of all on this. Let's talk about West Brom and Paterson potentially going there. Do you think he'd be a good signing for them?
I can understand why the top teams in the Championship would be looking at Paterson. His form, 8 goals, 4 assists in 20 games, pretty sensational, considering he's had injury problems last season as well at Bristol City. But I'm not particularly sure the kind of player that Paterson is what Villa initially needs at West Brom in January. I think the priority that everyone knows they need is a big physical striker. I don't think Jordan Hugill's really cut the mustard since he's come from Norwich, and I know the noise about Daryl Dyke it won't go away. Obviously, with his links with Ismail at Barnsley, I think that's the player they want. But it will cost a lot of money to prize him away from the MLS. They have players who can play off a big strike, the likes of Dion Garner, Colin Grant and Callum Robinson, players that you'd associate playing in the role that Paterson is. I know he's playing in like the number 10 role at Swansea as one of 2 players figuring there, but he's also played on the left as well, where Grant and Robinson would prefer to play. I just think maybe signing Paterson could just cause a few more issues in its worth. There'll be a lot of depth in that position, and I just think they should probably focus on centralising their targets just towards a striker instead of an attacking midfielder. That's nothing against Paterson. He's definitely a very good player, very technically gifted, but I just don't think what he is West Brom need right now.
Yeah, no, I can sort of echo your thoughts there, Ben. Adam, Planet Swans are reporting that there's a clause in the contract of Paterson at Swansea that if he plays enough games, he triggers a year's extension. It's probably quite likely that he's going to trigger that. In some ways, I would probably say it's best he stays at Swansea for now as well. Is that something you'd agree with?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think the reason why he's done so well is because he's managed to fit into Russell Martin's kind of style seamlessly. And I think that going to West Brom, I just don't think would be the right move really for him. I think West Brom would have to change their formation for kind of him to be effective. I know that they have a 3-4-3 West Brom, and they could use him perhaps as kind of like an inside forward. But for me, I mean, the style of play is so contrasting that I don't think he'd fit in well at West Brom. And I think that's the reason why. That Swansea won't have any kind of issues kind of keeping him. I think he'll kind of be convinced by Russell Martin's project. I think if Matt Grimes can be really convinced by it, like he was, amid interest from Brighton and Watford and Fulham, then I think Paterson will definitely stay. I know that his stats are impressive, but he needs to, show that he can replicate those stats throughout the whole season before he kind of moves on. So yeah, he's absolutely best served really at Swansea City. I don't think there's any doubts about that whatsoever.
Yeah, no, I certainly agree. I mean, he's really hit the ground running at Swansea. I think it might sometimes be the case for him that best to stay put for now. We'll see what happens with that one. Up next, we're going to talk John Swift, another player that's been in good form this year in the Championship for Reading. Adam, will come to you first of all with this one. Obviously, you're a Reading fan. It seems as though John Swift is perennially linked with Leeds United, and Phil Hay has said that again this week, that Leeds and Marcelo Bielsa are keen on the attacking midfielder. How concerned are you by this sort of continued speculation that there's been around Swift, and also given sort of what's happened with Reading recently in terms of the financial side of things, perhaps it could now be time where Swift moves on?
Yeah, it might be time for him to move on. I think I stopped worrying about it a couple of months ago because I think I'm resigned to the fact, just like West Brom are with Sam Johnston. Maybe they have a bit more hope than we do with Swift. I just don't see him staying unless we're promoted. And I think at the moment that would be an absolute miracle. I think at the moment we're fighting really for our survival. So I'm kind of resigned to losing him anyway. And I think probably in their heart of hearts, I think, the hierarchy at Reading are as well. I think for me, because we've got a business plan in place with the EFL, along with our points deduction that we have to meet, and we have to reduce our wage bill quite considerably, I don't think we'll be able to do that much business if we won't be able to do that much business anyway, with having to reduce our wage bill. So I think for me, they'll keep him until the end of the season. I don't really see the point in selling him now unless there's an obscene bid really for him that dramatically improves the situation. But yeah, I can see him definitely staying until the end of his contract and then moving on. I know that it'll be financially painful for Reading, but I don't see him moving on, especially with the owner really keen on keeping some of his prized assets. And obviously, whilst we're still in the relegation zone, not around the relegation zone, then I don't see him moving on. I think he's too much of a key player to move on, even if he does move on for free in the summer.
Okay. Ben, what do you make of this from a more neutral point of view? Let's say Swift does move to Leeds United. Whenever that happens, we're not too sure, but let's say it does. How big a hit do you think he could be at Elland Road?
I think he's a very technically gifted player. I mean, obviously he came through the Chelsea youth ranks. He's had quite a few EFL loans before he ended up going to Reading. And I think the start of the season he had this season, I think he's almost in double figures for goals, and he's been chipping in with assists as well. He's definitely a player that probably deserves a crack now at the Premier League. I know he had a very injury hit season last season, which probably put him a little bit under the radar going into this one. But he's definitely shown that he's definitely a top end champion player at the very least. And if he does go to Leeds, then you've seen what Marcelo Bielsa has done to some of the players that Leeds still have and have had from the Championship. The likes of Click, Forshaw, both playing midfield, have both improved dramatically since Bielsa's got the hands on him. So I think with the abilities that Swift already has, I think Bielsa can mould him into an even better player. And I don't think I have any doubts about him being a bit of a hit in the Premier League, whether that's a mid-table Premier League player or a bottom end one. I think he can definitely do something in the Premier League, but just remains to be seen. But I think Leeds would be a good fit for him, in that number 10 role.
Yeah, no, he's certainly a player that you could see in the Premier League sooner rather than later. And unfortunately for Adam and your fellow Reading fans, that could be without the Royals in the more immediate term at least. But we'll see what happens there with John Swift getting linked with Leeds once again. We're going to move to John Souttar now. He's a player that's also been regularly linked with a move away from his club Hearts. Championship sides regularly being linked with him, but Birmingham Live is reporting that Birmingham City are one of those sides that aren't looking to pursue a move for him at the moment, even though they have been linked. The likes of Nottingham Forest and Stoke, of course, Harry Souttar plays for Stoke at the moment. They've been linked with him, as well as Celtic and Rangers, as so often seems to be the case when a player outside the old firm excels in Scotland. Adam, what do you make of this story and the fact that Birmingham aren't that interested, or that's what we've been led to believe at the moment?
I mean, it's strange timing, really, isn't it? Because we've had another report come out today that Dion Sanderson, or I think it was yesterday actually by The Athletic, that Dion Sanderson might be recalled in January to Wolves. So he could become someone who kind of comes up on the radar for them after that in kind of preparation. I know that Wolves and Birmingham will probably be in quite close contact kind of over that. So they might have him really on the list to kind of get in. I'm not sure how much money they have at their disposal, But he could be available for six figures, really. So, and considering his contract's running out, he might not be, that dear. I mean, it depends on how many teams kind of bid for him. So, it remains to be seen what happens. Birmingham City have been really good, I think, in a back three this season, kind of giving themselves a real kind of clear way of playing under Lee Bowyer. I think I can make that kind of comparison to Stoke City as well, where there's been a season of comparison, a season of progress under really under both Michael O'Neill and Lee Bowyer. So to go back to a back two, to be forced to go back to a back two, I don't think would be good for their fortune. So I think that's one of the reasons why, if Sanderson does go, then they need a centre back at the top of their list. Obviously, injuries in recent years to Sutar will be maybe a bit off-putting for Birmingham, but if he's available for cheap enough, then he might be worth a gamble. But it is very strange timing, and I think whether Sanderson goes or not will have a bearing on whether they kind of pursue him or whether to leave it. Obviously, depending on their finances, they don't seem like the side that will really spend a lot in the January transfer window. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
As for the other clubs, Ben, that have been linked to him and haven't been ruled out of the race, at least at the moment, likes of Stoke and Forest, where do you think would be an ideal destination for him? Does he go and join his brother at Stoke? Obviously, his brother's just recovered he's starting his recovery from surgery. Does he go there? You're on mute, Ben.
Well, sorry about that. I think it would make sense if he did end up at Stoke. I think Leo Ostergaard's on loan from Brighton, isn't he? And I don't think they'll get him on a permanent because I think he's very highly rated down there. So at the end of the season, at least Stoke will need a centre-back, and obviously they'll need one for the rest of the season. I know James Chester and Danny Bath have got a lot of experience at Championship level, but they've never been quite convincing enough, like over the course of a season, to stick with them. Especially when they're trying to get in the playoffs this season. So I think if they do try and make a mid-season move from, I think that would be the ideal destination, and one that John Souttar would probably want to go to. He'll want to link up with his brother again. I think that'll be something that both of them will want to do when Harry's back fit. I think half the Championship's been linked with him though. Forest have, but I think they're pretty well stocked at centre-back. They've got Worrell, Figueiredo, McKenna, Embassaw. I think Blackburn could be an interesting one. Darryl Lenihan's contract's coming up at the end of the season. He's not renewed it yet, and I think Tony Mowbray's chief scout used to be at Celtic, so he knows the Scottish market very well, and he could be a good player to end up there. But I think in terms of a January deal, I think Hearts don't particularly want to sell him. I think they're of the belief that if he does go, it'll be for like a pre-contract agreement, and it'll have to be silly money to sell him mid-season, because obviously they have aspirations of their own, getting into the top 2 or 3 in the Scottish League. So it'll be interesting to see where he goes. But I can see Stoke being the ideal destination for John Souttar, whether it's January or the summer.
Yeah, certainly a player that's got plenty of interest in him at the moment. We'll have to monitor it closely and see where he ends up if he does indeed leave Hearts. Up next, we've got a Football League World exclusive that come to us earlier this week. It concerns James Norwood. Ipswich Town are willing to let him leave as early as the January window, and we've been told League One sides, including Plymouth, Portsmouth, Lincoln City and Oxford United even, are all keen on him. Ben, let's come to you first of all. Where do you think would be a good destination for James Norwood if he does leave Ipswich?
It's an interesting one, because quite a lot of these teams have got quite sharp shooting strikers. Ryan Hardy's playing well at Plymouth, and at Oxford, you've got Matty Taylor banging in the goals. I think the one team out of the 4 that have been linked that could probably do a bit of a boost up front is Lincoln. Dan Nlundulu from Southampton on loan's not really hit the ground running. I think he's just scored 1 goal in 14 games, and Tom Hopper's been out for a few months with an injury. He scored quite a few last season. So I think that's an area that, Michael Appleton could do with strengthening. And we know Norwood does score goals at this level. He got double figures in his first season when he signed for Ipswich after, that goal scoring run at Tranmere. So, I think Lincoln could be the best landing spot for him. Portsmouth could be an interesting one. I think it may have been partially ruled out by their local sources that they'll be in for him. But Portsmouth could be an interesting one. John Marquis hasn't been as prolific as he has been in previous seasons, even though he has the service from Ron and Curtis and Marcus Harness. And, I don't think George Hurst has really hit the ground running either at Portsmouth on loan. So, that could be a potential decent landing spot for him. But yeah, out of the 4 teams, I can see Lincoln being, the ideal one for him.
Adam, are you particularly surprised by how it's gone for Norwood at Ipswich? I mean, particularly this season, it's gone quite sour for him, hasn't it? I mean, I think it's only 22 minutes he's played in League One this season. What do you make of that?
Yeah, it is sad. I think in the summer, I mean, maybe I wasn't all that surprised because they've had a massive rebuild at Portman Road. Obviously, they managed to bring in Macaulay Bonne, who, okay, he was on the bench for quite a lot of last season at QPR, but is still a championship player in my eyes. Joe Pigott, leading talisman for AFC Wimbledon last season. So I think both of them kind of getting ahead of him. And obviously, Connor Chaplin can also fill in there as well. He was playing regularly for Barnsley last season. So it hasn't surprised me this season as much, obviously, because of the massive rebuild. And I think Paul Cook was kind of hinting towards that anyway in the April that he wanted a bit of a rebuild. But before that, yeah, it has been quite a disappointing spell. I know that he was ever present, really, for the likes of Tranmere Rovers. So, to come to Ipswich Town and only be a semi-regular player was, it was a bit of a surprise, really. I think he does need a fresh start, to be honest. It doesn't look as though he's going to revive his career with Paul Cook. I think it's too far gone now, really. But at the same time, he's the kind of player you really want to kind of ship off perhaps to a European league or to like Ukraine or something, because he's going to come back and haunt you. If he goes to Portsmouth, if he goes to Lincoln City, any of those League One teams, he's definitely going to come back to Portman Road and score. So that's one thing they've got to weigh up, really. Is it worth selling him to a promotion rival and then risk kind of him getting into form and kind of being detrimental to their own promotion hopes? Or, do they let him go? It's another wage off the wage bill. I know that, some players at Ipswich took wage cuts to come there. But yeah, I think for me, it's one that they've got to weigh up as a 50-50 for me. So it'll be interesting to see what they do.
Okay, we will see what happens there. James Norwood potentially moving from Ipswich Town as early as January certainly looks like it's one to keep an eye on ahead of next month. One final story to talk about before we wrap up the transfer zone for this afternoon, and that's involving Jed Spencer, currently on loan at Nottingham Forest from Middlesbrough. Raised a few Middlesbrough eyebrows, I think it's fair to say, when it was sanctioned earlier on at the start of the season. Obviously, he's been in great form for Forest, and now there's a suggestion that Chris Wilder is going to trigger the recall option and bring him back to Middlesbrough. Adam, are you particularly surprised to learn that that's Chris Wilder's thinking at the moment?
No, I think as soon as he was appointed, I think that's one of the first things that I thought about was bringing back Jed Spence, knowing that they've got a recall clause on him in January. I think it would be a good decision for them to recall him. Will weaken a potential promotion rival in Nottingham Forest. I think they've got to think about that as well. Even if they don't play him every single week. But I really do think he's going to come back and be one of the first names on the team sheet. Obviously, with Dyke still obviously filling in as centre back as well, and that obviously gives them another option in the centre as well. So that can only be a good thing for Middlesbrough when playing a back three. And obviously, with Paddy McNair as well, if he wants to play in midfield at some point, or if he's even required there, then having Dyke still in the middle, I think is a great option for them. And obviously, Spence can go out wide as a right wing back. I can see him being one of the first names on the team sheet. So I think it would be a good move. I know that it's probably quite harsh on Jones because he's been pretty decent this season. He's been one of Borrow's real bright sparks, really. But in this instance, I think you've got to think about the team first. And I think that Jed Spence will do more to enhance their promotion prospects rather than damage them. So for me, it's a no-brainer, really. I think he's got to bring him back in.
And Ben, I mean, from a Forest perspective, I suppose there was always going to be a concern that eventually Borough would want to bring him back. I mean, plenty of Forest fans would like to see him stay, but I mean, kind of looks like their chances are pretty slim of doing that. How do they go about obviously trying to, make a contingency plan for if and when he does get recalled?
Well, it does leave him, in like a bit of a situation where they'll need to replace him because he's been that much of a regular and a key figure in that system. They've still got Jordi Asetutu from Arsenal on loan, but I think like last season when he had a lot of hamstring issues, I think they've cropped up again. I think he's back in training. I've just seen today, so he might be on the comeback trail. I think there's reports stating that they'll be looking at a Premier League right back, an unnamed one as of yet. I did suggest in an article last month that they should try and make a play for Conor Bradley from Liverpool, a young Northern Irish international wing back, same position, same kind of player. I saw him, he came on against Preston in the Cup last month and he looked pretty quick. So he could be in the Spence mould and obviously got international experience, albeit only a couple of games. So I'm sure they'll have a plan up the sleeves. If Spence inevitably does head back in January, I think Conor Bradley could be one of the players they might look at. But I'm sure Steve Cooper will know best because he's been pretty shrewd when it comes to loan players at Swansea in the past.
Yeah, good opportunity for Cooper to start moulding that Forest squad how he'd like come the January window as well. That brings the transfer zone to a close for the day. Coming up tomorrow on Football League World TV, 2 shows. The debate at 12 p.m. Alfie Burns will be hosting that one. He's joined by Chris Thorpe and Ben. They're talking Paul Heckingbottom at Sheffield United and what he's got to do there at Bramwell Lane, having just been permanently appointed to replace Slavica Djukanovic. And then at 4:20 is the EFL London show. I'll be hosting that one. Billy Mully will be joining me. But for now, Ben, Adam, thanks for joining me this afternoon. People, wherever you've been watching, do subscribe to Football League World TV on YouTube. That would be greatly appreciated. And do like this video as well. That would help us out a great deal. But from us here, it's bye for now.